Hello, Hockey World from NASA. I'm Eklund. Sorry, this is just another angle, yet another angle of my house that's been in this podcast. It's very funny. It's
floating in space.
No, I know. Eventually, somebody could actually piece it all together. Usually, often you sit this way, so you see me this way. You see me the other direction too. But that was today because I'm using this other camera on my thing. For whatever reason, I was like totally disappearing and looking.
Yeah, but with the electron mic, or not the electron, with the telescope, shouldn't you have an open ceiling or something?
Yeah, no, yeah, no, it's a Celestron telescope for my days in the South Jersey Astronomy Club, and I've had it forever. I love it. I love astronomy. There's an incredible telescope out now, by the way, but we'll get into that later.
Actually, people go to Rowan and use their setup. Apparently, they used to let people in there with that gigantic one that they have, but I've never been in it.
Oh yeah, no, I've been in there. I love astronomy. It's one of my favorite things, but it's the hobby that has fallen off my radar since having a family. Just something has to give.
So the cool factor is not there.
Yeah. Plus, Jupiter's going to be there next month. It's not like you have to worry about it. It's like you'll be able. It's like a lot of things that are timely. Astronomy's not timely at all. I mean, with the exception
of the occasional comet that comes through.
Yeah, or the eclipses, but those are like obvious. But yeah, for the most part, the Club Nebula. I mean, they're going around. They'll be around.
Anyway. I got frustrated with astronomy because I could never remove the spot off of Jupiter.
Oh yes, I know. Yeah, it's hard to rub that thing off. I know. All right, we got some things to talk about today.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna be joined by Kevin Allen shortly, who's right now in the Red Wings press availability. But he'll be jumping in shortly as well. He should be here in any minute. But we'll start. Here we go. We're gonna start right in with this. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, December 6th, 2021.
I'm Michael Agello, and Generalissimo Francisco Franco is still dead.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology. Congratulations to the Hodges family for getting in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, who? I didn't hear the announcement.
All right, I'll say it real quick. It was Gil Hodges, Minnie Minoso, Buck O'Neill, Tony Oliva, and somebody else. But
I'll look it up. That's great. I'm happy for all of them. That's fantastic. I'll just keep the steroid guys out of the Hall of Fame, and everything will be fine.
That's Kevin Allen from HockeyBuzz.com.
Yeah, I'm in the witness protection.
I know. That's why I had to change my direction. That I was aiming to that. I was also
yeah.
Mine was even worse. Mine you could see straight through me. It was really bizarre. And I'm Eklund. I'm not a vampire. And you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we have a lot of goings today to get to. We'll start with the goings. And it's beautiful, beautiful. Lots of stockings. You got your share of stockings over there.
Yeah, we do. Large family.
Yeah, me with great care, as I can tell.
Let me just read this list quickly, and then we'll get on to the hockey.
Yes, please, Mike.
Minnie Minoso, Gil Hodges, Jim Cott, thank God.
Jim Cott's where I left out.
Yeah, Tony Oliva, Dick Allen, Buck O'Neill, Bud Fowler, Allie Reynolds. That's a little surprise. I mean, great pitcher.
No. They didn't all get in. Dick Allen, I don't think got in.
Well, okay. Oh, 3 or 4. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Dick Allen, I think, missed by a vote, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, 11. Yeah. Okay. But those, yeah. So I'm glad.
Was the one I left out.
Yeah, I'm glad these guys got in.
A story about this. I finished up the Willie Horton book, and it's off to the publisher. And in that book, Willie listed off a bunch of people that he thought had been wronged. And with the exception of Allie Reynolds, it's all of those people you just mentioned.
Good for Willie. He knows.
Yeah, he knew, there was no Reynolds on there, but, Dick Allen, Minnie Minoso, Tony Oliva, he thought was a travesty that he had.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's talk about hockey for a second, because we have two teams that we've talked about, and these teams have shared. It's interesting. I've always thought of them as like sister teams in a way. Like there's something about the well, there's Kevin's Feet. We haven't seen them in a while. Kevin's Feet will be doing the podcast today.
I'll bring him back.
Here's what's going on. Vancouver and Philadelphia are two teams that we honestly have had similar pasts. Like they haven't won in a while. I mean, the Vancouver's never won a Stanley Cup. but they feel like they've always been similar. They both have shared a coach now in Alain Vigneault. They both are, expectations are always high, and they're always battling, but they're not quite there. I don't know. And now we look at this year where both had, done significant things in the summer. Like what we're seeing here is how a GM can get a coach fired. All right.
Well,
in both situations.
I think it's more than
I don't think that's necessarily the case, because we'll get into that more. But
I think the commonality of both of these, Kev, is that both Jim Benning and Chuck Fletcher made extensive roster changes this offseason in the hopes that was the reason why that they were not having any success. And the addition of Ekman Larson and Connor Garland in Vancouver, signing all their players to long-term contracts, and obviously what happened in Philadelphia with Ristolainen and Ellis and Atkinson, it didn't work. And they stuck as long as they could with the coach that they both of them liked, but in the end, the players weren't playing for them, so they had to move on.
Well, I think all that's true, but sort of. I mean, the Philadelphia situation, it's hard to know that it's going to work because the player they were counting on the most,
Ellis,
only played 4 games because of injury. He was crucial to that mess.
Right.
So I don't know whether it worked or it didn't work, but there were, for sure, that is true in Philadelphia, there was greater problems than how.
It's more than Ryan Ellis, a lot more.
Yeah, yes, but I don't think you can say those were bad moves.
No. Nobody's saying they're bad moves.
Yeah, I thought those were really good moves. Where Benning, I think,
the Ekman Larson deal right now is
bad.
That's an albatross with the whole 20 years on the contract. But no, I'm not saying that the players that Philadelphia added were bad. I think the Ellis injury is definitely a contributing factor because he's only played a few games. But go ahead,
Here's something I put together in my head, Mike, that a couple hours ago kind of came to me, and I've said it on a few shows. So, I've watched Vigneault all these years, so has Kevin, but I probably covered him a little closer with some of the other teams he was on other than Vancouver, but I also knew people who covered Vancouver like Kevin, so I would hear stuff. And the one thing in this era right now is, so in the bubble, most things are controlled. Coach has a lot of control over things. There weren't a lot of players in and out. There was no travel. So Flyers had no trouble in the bubble. Last year, there were a lot of complaints out of Vigneault. Every couple, press conferences or so, I don't have enough practice time. I don't like the way this is sort of going. We're doing this the best we can, whatever. They don't make the playoffs. This year, we're back to an 82-game schedule, but it's not like an 82-game season of like 6 years ago where you could control everything as a coach. But now, again, guys could be out because of COVID. Guys can be out for other reasons. Right. Injuries do seem to be on the rise. And I do think the adaptability for Alain Vigneault to this, and also for whatever reason, trying to have his team be a dump and chase team right until the very end when they don't have the speed to do it, were two of the big failures of him. But I think his adaptability really was in question there. And I think he just never could change enough.
Well, I guess what I would say in final analysis is, in the case of the Vancouver Canucks, the general manager was more to blame for the mess.
Yes.
In Philadelphia, the coach was more to blame for the mess. That's what I would say.
But I will say this, Chuck got cover when he made those moves in the offseason because Comcast pushed him in that direction.
Yeah.
So
and agrees.
But I don't think he's I think he's on the hot seat now. If it doesn't improve, I think he'll be gone. And
that's where this is interesting, Kevin, because what we saw with Philadelphia is that Fletcher fires Eck's favorite. I'm sure Eck just popped a bottle of champagne for the demise of Michel.
I apologize. Craziness going on here in the house, but we're all good about
it. But we're just you were very happy at the Michel Therrien firing, and obviously Vigneault, who's got term left in his contract. But they go to Mike Yeo as the interim, and what Pierre LeBrun said was sort of cryptic. He said, "Well, he's interim, but he could be head coach, but they haven't contacted anybody yet." And Kev, right now it's Chuck Fletcher, Mike Yeo, this Minnesota Wild connection,
Yeah.
They're paying Vigneault for 2 more years at $5 million per. Is it a possibility that Mike Yeo is the guy and not somebody else?
Yeah, I think it is possible, but I mean, I think in Chuck Fletcher's situation, I think he has to put the interim label on and then sort of get a feel for what his bosses are thinking. Do they really think he should go out and get someone like Taka, or can he get use a Mike Yeo and just move on? I mean, Mike Yeo obviously has head coaching experience.
Yes.
It's not like you're bringing in some guy who doesn't have some street cred.
No, the players like Mike Yeo. I mean, I'm not saying they don't.
Yeah.
He's a very popular guy. But at the same time, I do think I don't think it's all breast shaking his head, and I agree that this is not where they're going. Because of the fact that their issues right now, they are in a very bad spot. They're trending away from the playoffs quickly.
They've got
Colorado in town tonight.
Yeah, they got four games in 6 nights.
Yeah, this is a hard time to bring in a coach. Like they can't get another guy in here quicker than that. I mean,
I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
Generally, they get one in for the next game. I think.
They were the next game, but tonight
the Vancouver Canucks, had Bruce Boudreau in place before they fired the guy.
Yeah, but I don't think that here's my feeling, Kevin. Fletcher held a press conference less than a week ago talking about how he wasn't going to fire this guy. So I think we're in Vancouver. I think that they were going to they were thinking about this for a while and talking to Boudreau. I don't think Fletcher had any intention to do this, but I think it got so bad.
Well, Elliot
gave him no choice.
Elliot Friedman said that basically Vancouver moved quickly on Boudreau because they were afraid that somebody else was going to hire him.
I think the Flyers could do the same with Taka because somebody else.
Well, let's just look at history though. Historically, teams name coaches right away frequently.
Right.
They do.
Yeah.
They do, but I do think X right in the sense of because of that press conference, because Fletcher also has experience with Yeo, he was going to give Yeo a chance anyhow. I went back and looked at
we're not even arguing the same thing because that's
no.
all
But I went back and looked at older quotes, Kev, and it was interesting because Yeo basically was called by Fletcher just to see if he had any interest in becoming an assistant.
Right.
So Fletcher was going to bring in Yeo no matter who the coach was, whether it was AV or anybody else. And so this was probably always a plan for Fletcher. Like, hey, I bring him in. He coached for me. If this doesn't work, he's going to get a shot. So I think this was always
remember, Russ, you're dead on right because you have to remember the dynamic of Therrien and Vigneault.
Right. And they were joined at the hip.
Right. This is old school Montreal coaches. These are guys who are straight up, and they are, talking to each other in French in the hallways. They're doing this is happening, Fletcher wants to know what the hell's going on in there. So he gets
this is all standard stuff. One for the general manager and one for the coach. It's kitchen, it's Glenville, and you're acting like this was unique.
No.
It wasn't, not at all.
I'm not saying it's not standard. I'm saying that there was a lot more than just that standard thing. There was also the communication factor of Fletcher really wanting to be sure that he knew what was going on because he's bringing in 2 very strong personalities in Therrien and Vigneault.
Yeah. No, that's true. But usually the GM does have his guy, and then there's your guy, and
that's what they did, and Vigneault's still there. The thing that the issue is bigger in Philadelphia, though, just from being around the arena, and Russ, this too. It's just like the issue is that the Flyers are not the Flyers anymore to those fans right now. And you really sense that. And I think that's where they're getting calls.
Yeah.
Since Taka was fired, they're getting calls for him.
Yeah.
Even before the Flyers were really doing terribly, they were getting calls that, we need to bring in a Flyer. We need to bring in a Flyer.
I guess my only point is just the fact that they haven't named Taka as a coach tells me that Fletcher is considering Yeo as a long-term guy.
Yeah. And the other names that were, obviously if nobody's been talked about yet, but Friedman did mention David Quinn, the former Rangers coach, and he did mention John Tortorella as a possibility. So
Tortorella never worked there, never.
No, I don't think. I think Tortorella would be a disaster in Philadelphia because they'd eat him alive, or he'd eat them alive. But
one or the other.
Yeah,
I will tell you the other part that's failing, and I think this is where Chuck Fletcher could be in a lot of trouble. So, and Brent Flair. The drafting's been okay. The development's been lousy. It's been lousy for like 2.5 years. And now that we're watching players literally stall in their development on the ice, Ivan Provorov included, for a lot of different reasons. There is no answer because Lehigh is horrible, and Ian LePerrier, who's the new coach there, is really off to a terrible start. And so even if you want to say, well, Mike Yeo can bring up players, he's got a couple players he can bring up. I mean, the fact is Mike Yeo now will change the system. He'll probably play a cycling kind of system, but he also wants to hold on to the puck. You're not going to be able to hold on to the puck with Nick Seal or holding on to someone's neck. That's his only play at this point other than blocking a shot. So maybe they'll bring up someone like Adam Clendenning who at least has some speed. But again, Mike Yeo doesn't even have the right parts to play a Mike Yeo system. And Fletcher can cure this with another trade because nobody wants to trade right now. That's the part that
What's the number one reason? You guys see them all the time. The number one reason why their scoring is not where it was last season.
I my opinion,
sucks the life out of the team.
Yeah, I wrote about this.
The power play being so awful. It's 31st in the league. It derails them most times.
Well, here's my thinking on it. Okay, I wrote about this today too. Hockey players are all about confidence. Like that. This is a sport about confidence. A confident team can beat a better skilled team that's not as confident. We look what Montreal does last year in the playoffs. Confident teams are really hard to beat. Hockey players are about confidence. And how do hockey players get confidence? They get confidence from performing at their highest, from doing really well, obviously, but also from being given specific roles that they know they excel at. This guy is told, you're our best cycler, you're our best forward checker, you're the guy who carries the puck in the best. We want you to do this. And guys have their own feeling of sense of purpose and what they actually are doing.
Right.
And that's really important to hockey players because that has not been nourished at all under these coaches. And what has happened slowly over time is guys like Konechny, who could score goals before, suddenly is told, you got to play this way
Yeah, I do think that's a factor.
And Farabee happens too. Farabee scores a bunch of goals. So suddenly well, he can score goals. Let's talk about his defense. All right, that's fine. That's typically what happens. I get that. But and then you combine that with, and I'll finish this thought, Mike, is the Michel Therrien concept of a guy who really cut his teeth on what he did with the Penguins, which is teaching a good offensive team how to play better all over the ice, how to that's what he does there. He comes in and they give a defensive coach from the 1900s, basically, the job of running a 2021 power play, which has completely been the hugest disaster imaginable. So to me, I think that's where their scoring has gone down. The loss of confidence.
And what you just said about infusing confidence, I think, is at the heart of the Boudreau signing with Vancouver, because we've seen in the past what he did in Washington, where when he came in, Ovechkin had basically found new life. And, not that Ovechkin was bad before, but, he really helped Ovechkin sort of find his way when I think he was struggling when the previous coach got fired. And in Anaheim, when he replaced Randy Carlyle, that really brought back Getzlaf and Perry, and Anaheim played well for a while. The thing about Boudreau is he just can't win seventh games in the playoffs, and that's really.
Yeah, I just was on radio and we were talking about this too. My thing about Game 7 is you can't have it both ways. Right. And by that, what I mean is people say all the time, including people on this panel, that it's a flip of the coin if you win a Game 7. It's a lot of luck. It's just everything. It's a flip of the coin. So now if you have a guy who doesn't win Game 7s, is he just incapable of winning Game 7s, or is he just unlucky? I mean, that's the thing, because he wins everywhere else. Guys want to play for him.
If he wins one of them, it'll end the conversation.
Well, immediately. It's like Ovechkin can't win a Stanley Cup, right?
I just think you can't have both ways in that. I agree with Mike completely about Boudreau. I love that hire, and as I said before, this wasn't really the coach's fault in Vancouver. This was, in my mind, all Benning's fault. There, and they get when they fired him, that it's for just cause there, as far as I'm concerned.
And I think Travis Green will end up getting a job down the line. I think his reputation is pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. But I do agree with Mike that Boudreau, it's like playing for your grandfather. He comes in, people think he's all rainbow and sunshine. It's not quite like that. He can be a grumpy old guy. But he also, deep down, everybody knows that he loves all of his players. He doesn't really want to, he wants them to succeed, and he's pretty clear about it. And and everybody feels good about themselves after.
And he's out in the open with his message. It's nothing veiled.
Yeah,
You're absolutely right. It's
That's really
what
clear,
you see is what you get, and you just sense that he doesn't mean it. Like if he's yelling at you, he's just yelling at the whole team. Like
which will be refreshing in Vancouver, because I think it's been clouded and convoluted over the years, and he's sort of a straight
enough players. They do have enough players.
I mean, we remembered you Kevin, tell us the kind of player Bruce Boudreau was. Like a lot of people don't remember him as a hockey player.
If Kevin doesn't, I do, because I saw him.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike. You can go first. But
I mean, he was a minor league offensive gem.
He was an offensive player.
He scored tons of points in the minors. He never made that kind of splash in the NHL. He got a couple opportunities, but he's always been known as somebody who accentuates and tries to draw out the best offense out of players. He's definitely an offensive coach. Now, sometimes that's to his detriment, because I think his teams have suffered defensively. But depending on who they have as assistant coaches, if there's a balance there between what he wants to get out of his players and what he needs to win games, then it could be a good combination. But yeah, I think he'll get the most. And that team, Pettersson struggled, Besser has struggled. The only one who hasn't struggled has been JT Miller. I mean, Bo Horvat has struggled, and we know about Ekman Larson. There's enough talent there. He just has to draw it out.
St. Catherine Saints, Mike. St. Catherine Saints, Bruce Sprudger stats, right?
Yep.
In 1983-84. He plays for the St. Catherine Saints, who were the Maple Leafs farm team at the time. Right? 82-83. Sorry, 82-83. 80 games played, 50 goals, 72 assists.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember him as a player. I can tell you, if 3-on-3 overtime was around, he'd have been king.
Right.
He loved open ice.
Yeah.
He was a hockey news sensation.
He was.
Because you didn't know anything about the American League, but if you went to the hockey news, you could get all the stats.
Yeah.
And you kept seeing this Boudreau guy, and then he'd get called up, and you'd think he's going to do that again. And he would have, and Mike will attest to this, he'd have like a couple of shifts where there was a wow factor to him.
Yes.
But he just couldn't do it over a sustained period. And if you leaned on him, he just couldn't do it at that level.
Right.
Yeah, and in a 32-team NHL, he would have been a consistent NHLer, but at that point, I think it was 21. So he and the Leafs weren't particularly good in the 80s until Wendell Clark got drafted in 85. So
he reminded me of the Red Wings version of Bruce Boudreau was Mark Lofthouse.
Oh God,
who was an AHL hockey news sensation, as I like to call it. You were really good in the hockey news when you could score.
And we still have those guys. Remember Brian Dobbin? But never, that was like later. But there were certain players that just were AHL superstars. Like they were crazy, and they just did unbelievable things. So I think that there are very different situations. They're different teams. They're both teams I think that still believe they can save their seasons in Vancouver.
Kev, let me ask you this: have you heard anything on the Vancouver GM front? Because right now it's interim. Right now it doesn't. But there seems to be a hint that they are going to bring somebody in. It's not going to be an internal promotion. No,
I think they'll take a look at all the guys. They have to talk to Jim Rutherford if you're doing your due diligence. Because they're not dissimilar. The ages are different and the level of accomplishments are different, but they're not dissimilar from the Penguins that Rutherford took over in this respect. They had 6 or 7 really quality, skilled players, and then Rutherford changed 12 guys around them.
Right.
And that's often the hardest thing to do. Look
at Zito just did it in Florida very successfully. Very similar.
Edmonton still maybe they finally seem to have done it this year, but it's been hard.
But I think they're going to talk to Rutherford. I saw reports today. I'm sure you did on social media that Bergevin is someone they want to speak to as well.
Now, I do have some breaking news. It looks like Cale Makar and Nazem Kadri will be in the lineup tonight. So maybe the only weakness for Colorado will be in net. I don't think Francouz is playing. I don't see anything.
I think it's Ahanen it's either.
He's not terrible. I've seen him in other circumstances.
Yeah. The other name that popped up on social media yesterday, Kevin, I question the validity of it, was John Chaika, because I would think his name right now is still mud in the NHL because of everything that had happened in Arizona.
Yeah, I would say that too, just from the conversations I've had with people about him. I really like John. I thought he was a smart guy, and he was interesting. And I think he could have, over time, using sort of modern techniques, building a team. But I don't sense that people have the same like of him that I had around the league. So
yeah. I think Fuda should be considered. Obviously, I still think that
I would agree with that.
He's a guy I absolutely believe is going to be a great GM in this league. And
another name that might pop up. If they do an extensive search, who has former ties to the Canucks, is Lawrence Gilman, who was an assistant GM for the Leafs. He used to be an assistant GM under, I think, Pat Quinn back in the day. And, so I think the Aquilinis know him. So he's basically Kyle Dubas's right-hand man in Toronto. So I don't think he would hold him back if there was genuine interest, but I think that name's a possibility.
Over the weekend, I was told that we could have another team that was looking to get rid of their coach too, which is really, we really are looking at like a deluge here if that happens. And that was the New Jersey Devils, and that the Devils coach, which I know people are going to be surprised at, but I was told flat out that there was serious consideration on making a move there. The Devils have been up and down for sure. They have moments when they look really good. There are moments when they don't look really good. There doesn't seem to be a great relationship between Jack Hughes and Lindy Ruff, which is an issue, I think. I'm not saying that that's a big issue, but for whatever reason, I was told flat out from a very reliable source that if things don't really drastically turn around with New Jersey in a week or two, we could see that change.
Well,
funny, that came up today in my podcast with Tom Laidlaw as well, as he had kind of heard that as well.
Well, I'll say this because I know Lindy extensively from his history in Buffalo. Lindy Ruff, and that's why I was always sort of shaking my head at the fit of Lindy Ruff as a veteran coach. And, we know his issues in the past with young players. He's a guy who loves veterans and loves to fit them in certain positions. But in Buffalo, and especially Russian players, Max Finneganov was a player that he sort of singled out as somebody for criticism. A couple other players as well. And in Dallas, we know basically he ran Valery Nikushkin back to the KHL until he got fired, and then Nikushkin came back to the NHL. I thought it was a not questionable because he's definitely a qualified NHL coach, but where the Devils were and the type of coach that they needed, he didn't seem to fit. So I wouldn't be surprised if they continue to struggle that he gets fired.
I'll give you a comparison for him too, because I think Mike's bang on that assessment of him. That he reminds me, and I got along great with Lindy. I actually liked him, and I appreciated the fact that you could ask him any question, any measure, no matter how difficult it is. Yes. And he would be unfazed by it. And he wouldn't shoot you darts. He would either make light of it or, kind of just move on. But he reminded me a little bit of Joel Quenneville in this regard. He has his own ideas about players. And I don't want to say often, but sometimes they're in conflict with the general managers. Most coaches will bend the knee to the general manager. Right. Lindy does not.
No.
Yeah.
And I think Joel Quenneville is a guy that doesn't often do that either. Yeah. So in that regard, I think he makes determinations about players, and then suddenly, that player is less of a player than he seemed to be.
And I think that's a little bit happened with Hughes. And I know Hughes has been injured. People are saying he's been injured this year, but it does not just about this past injury of Jack Hughes. It goes beyond that. And it just goes to the point where, the one thing I'll say about Lindy, and this is just, if you ask any player who's ever played for Lindy Ruff, like I've talked to many of them over the years, and they will tell you, even players who played for several coaches, they'll tell you that Lindy Ruff is probably the smartest coach they ever played for. They'll tell you flat out, he just knows everything about everything. Like to what you're saying, Kevin, his ability to respond to any question, he just is crazy intelligent when it comes to
he was tutored under Scotty Bowman in Buffalo. So
yeah, he just has that. He has so much knowledge and knows what's happening in the game on such a deep level that it really does impress players. Like players are impressed by him. They feel like, and I think that impresses GMs too. Was part of the reason that if he's out there, you're gonna if you're gonna interview Lindy Ruff, you're probably gonna hire Lindy Ruff. You're not gonna leave there saying you're not gonna hire the guy.
Well, I think Mike's right on when he says he's just a professional, so what you're getting with him. So he knows what he's doing, and but it doesn't. It hasn't always translated.
No, it doesn't always translate for sure.
Now let's talk a couple things like on the ice. The New York Islanders still have not won in their own building. I don't know. Lou is the best there is in terms of a general manager, and he's got to be scratching his head right now at what is going on with this team. They just don't. They're not.
I saw them the other night, and I'll tell you, I don't know what was happening because this all started before COVID. But right now, they're still in COVID fatigue. It was like watching a team in slow motion against Detroit. Yeah. They just didn't have any energy. They couldn't play the way. Now, again, that doesn't explain what happened. Maybe it was the long road trip that that gave them some lethargy as well. But boy, I watched that team, and that's not the way a Barry Trotz team plays. They just seem to be skating around and with no purpose, although they did get it together and finally got a third goal and tied the game up. But then you would expect, a regular Trotz team, once they got a late tying goal, would have won it in overtime. Yeah, they did not. So
no, they didn't. And I don't think that some people in our chat room are saying they think Trotz is in trouble. I don't think we're at that point.
No.
I don't, because I think that this goes beyond. I think Lou actually realizes that if Lou's going to blame anyone, he probably would, if he was being really flat out with you, would probably blame himself for some of the stuff that's happened, for some of the moves that have been made. That's not necessarily things he has had to do some cap management stuff that has not really worked out perfectly for him.
Right, but people are looking at the fact that the average age of the team is going up by how many years, and I'm like, okay, that's sort of misleading because Chara is not a core guy, and they brought him in to be a 5'6".
Now, Mike, also speed. It's like as they get older, they get slower, and like Kevin said, they look lethargic, and they do look lethargic, and they do look slower. I mean, this Islanders team, the Islanders team that was in the bubble that we saw a few years ago, for example, was much faster than this team. This team is not quick.
And I made the point last week. It's like I think they're finally with Pulak out. So there's gone your big shot from the point on the power play is gone. You traded away Devin Taves because you couldn't fit him under the cap. Then you traded Leddy for the same reason. Their mobility on the back end is now questionable. I think they have good enough speed up front, but when you add a Parise and you add Chara on the back end, the overall team speed has decreased, but they're just not scoring. And it's like that. You look at their Anders Lee is back. They got Nelson. They got Barzal. The players that have scored and been effective are just not.
But last year, Everly was a constant scorer. He's gone. Brock Nelson is a very important player. He's injured. Yeah, so there's a lot of things that have kind of gone wrong for him. But I keep agreeing with Mike all day today, but he's right on this as well.
That check, Mike.
Yeah, it's scary, Kev.
Yeah, Lamarillo has made some moves that haven't worked out. Like they've missed Nick Leddy from the first game, and I think they underestimated his ability to get the puck in. Now we see it in Detroit.
I sure
the puck goes in the zone. The puck comes out of the zone. Right. Nick Leddy gets it out. That's what he does. The puck comes in, he gets it out.
It's not something that shows up on the highlights, but it's real.
No. I mean, he's very effective at that. The players have noticed it. He's showed them how to skate it out. He can get the puck through the neutral zone, which the Red Wings were unable to do last season. I mean, he's played a role in the fact that the Red Wings have been better than expected. And,
I think this is an excellent point made by Jonathan in our chat room. The Islanders miss Leddy for sure. Trotz's system needs speedy D that can transition. And right now their D is slow, Char, and Green. Should be 7th and 8th D men, not clocking 18 minutes a night. I think that is, when you look back at Trotz, even with the Predators, he always had fast defensemen.
Yeah, you're right. The guy's right.
And this is definitely a team. And when you look, I kind of also see a little bit of the of the opposite of what Bill Guerin did in Minnesota happening on the island. You know, where you want a locker room to be taken over by your younger guys. When you bring Char and Parise into a locker room, these are two very, very strong characters. Like this is like that change. That's like, you know, a bit of the opposite of what Bill Guerin did in Minnesota, which obviously in Minnesota is working wonders right now.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Minnesota, because I got to see them firsthand against Toronto on two games the Leafs played. I thought were vastly different, but against Minnesota, the only thing, like, I like their defense a lot, and Spurgeon isn't even playing right now because he's injured. They're big and rough up front. That line with Greenway and Marcus Foligno and Eriksson Ek ran roughshod over the Leafs for the first half of the game, and then the Leafs made some adjustments. The only question I have is goaltending, Kev. I don't know if Cam Talbot and Capo Kakinen can carry them past maybe a round or two. Talbot is a veteran guy, and he's had some experience, and he's played well. But I don't know. I mean, could they be in the Fleury mix? Could they be in the Korpisalo or Khudobin mix when it comes to the deadline? Because I think they need a goaltender.
Yeah. I mean, it is a question mark in my opinion. I'm not sure they see it as one yet.
Right.
But they could get there, especially as long as they keep winning and keep kind of convincing themselves that they can make an extended run. I mean, what I would say to that is we saw the Canadians go to the final. So Minnesota's capable as well.
Oh yeah, no, easily.
So they've played very well. I've watched a few of their games on television, and and they've got, what I really like is when you have a team that plays a good system and can win that way, and then you have an X factor as they do.
Kaprizov is unbelievable.
Yeah, and that's what you want. It's like the best thing going when you've got a great system that wins for you, and you got one guy who can separate himself from everybody else.
And that's a team whose coach has given them what I was talking about that the Flyers weren't getting, like confidence. All those players know what they're doing. They know exactly the roles they're playing. Yeah,
I would also say, and this is hard because I know him very well, but I would say they felt it was addition by subtraction and changing the leadership there. They've thought that let's be generous and say that it just had gotten stale.
Yeah,
the leadership.
It's not even that. Like the nicer way to say it, and I think the way they say it, which honestly is the nicest way to say it, is the fact that you just want your young guys to feel like they can take those roles.
Right. The new leaders can't.
Yeah, I think it went beyond that, but yeah.
I mean that's a nice way to say it. Right?
That's a truth.
It's a truth. I mean, they're afraid to talk up when Parise and Suter are in the room.
Right.
They're not afraid when they're gone, and maybe that's true. Maybe that's overblown a little bit, but. I do think there's something to it. There are fun and Talbot, the confidence Talbot has right now is amazing. And that the reality is that Guerin sees Talbot as a goalie who's not going to lose you a game, flat out. That's what he is. He's a goalie who won't lose you a game, and he's not spectacular in any way, shape, or form. But they don't need it. They don't need him to be spectacular yet. Like in the playoffs, at some point you will.
That's what I mean. Because honestly, the way they played in that first half of that game, and the Leafs came back, scored 3 goals, got a point out of it. It was a good effort by them. But the way the Wild played, they were extremely impressive, extremely physical, have a lot of talent. And I'm like, okay, this team has got almost all the aspects of a team that could make a big playoff run. I just don't know whether Cam Talbot can do the only guy I can think of in the last few years that has done that is Khudobin, because Khudobin is basically, I think, an average goaltender who had a year where he just stood on his head in the playoffs. I don't know whether Cam Talbot can do that for them.
Here's another thing that's always great about sports. So Minnesota Wild felt so strongly about moving out Suter and Parise that they're eating a tremendous amount of salary in order to do it. That's how strongly they felt about it. It was time to move them out. Now Suter goes to the Dallas Stars, and if you want to know one of the reasons why the Dallas Stars have suddenly found their game,
that's right.
It's Suter. Suter has really brought that defense together, and he's playing great. I don't know if you've watched any of their games, but he's playing that kind of Suter style where, you barely notice him, but at the end of the game, you can see he's played 25 minutes.
Yeah,
he's a plus player. He's had a shot or two on goal. He's
such a minute guy.
Yeah, and I mean,
that in your thoughts, Kev. You had some really good thoughts I wanted to get into real quickly if we could too, and on your Thursday thoughts, because they were really solid. I mean, this is like from this is your last Thursday thoughts on December 2nd, but I haven't gotten a chance to talk to me at least about them yet. But yeah, you had the McCarthy in there too. But I really the one I wanted to find the one thought here I thought that was really, really solid, and that was where is it? Oh yeah, it was the Klingberg thought also with Dallas that you had talked about with Klingberg, which I thought was really interesting.
Yeah, no, and that's really been true. If you go back and actually look when the report came out, and I don't remember whether it was Elliott or Pierre, but one of the guys had the report that said where the Stars acknowledged that they had gotten a lot of calls on Klingberg, but they weren't inclined to trade him. Since then, Klingberg has really played well. Like he needed to hear that. I think the Stars knew that he needed to hear that. That's why they confirmed that they didn't want to, trade him. I mean, he's, had assists. He's +4 in the last 5 years. During the winning streak, he's been a factor.
Well, the Stars don't want to trade him, but the problem is, can the Stars sign him? And based on what they're paying out for guys like Sagan and Ben, who I think everybody acknowledges they're starting to go on the downslope of their career. I mean, I hope that's not the case, but they've had a bunch of injuries and haven't really played up to expectations. And Heiskanen making over $8 million. I mean, the rumor is Klingberg wants in the $7 to $8 million a year range, and they simply can't afford it. And now Ben Bishop is going down to the American Hockey League for a conditioning stint, which is one step closer to him coming back. And if he comes back, they have 4 goaltenders and no room to fit 2 of them. So they have some interesting. I mean, maybe they can trade Khudobin, give him away. I mean, there's enough teams that need goaltending out there, but
there's one in Philly that would grab him in a heartbeat. Like the Philly situation, there's no way the Flyers make the playoffs with Martin Jones as their backup. It's just flat.
But
it won't happen because it's nothing against the guy. It's just
Khudobin,
they need to get points out of their backup goalies.
Khudobin's making over $3 million, and I think has 3 years. Yeah, he's another year left in his contract. So I mean, can Philadelphia fit that? So
they'd have to be creative, but they could probably. They do have some money. I think that a new coach is definitely going to demand another backup. I think that's just that you can't get around that.
And that's a good point by Tony that Radulov is in the last year of his deal, and Pavelski's playing fantastic right now.
Oh, he is. Yeah.
I mean,
he's old man River, man. He just keeps going.
Yeah,
he's really impressive too because he really is playing well.
He's such a fan favorite too. I remember when he got traded out of when he left San Jose. There's my friends who are Sharks fans who usually don't like. The Sharks fans are pretty even fans in general. They follow it, they like it, they go to the games, they enjoy it, but they love when their team does well. But I never saw any. It wasn't this when Marleau left or Thornton left. I didn't get the same kind of passion as when Pavelski left. Like when what they said to me about Pavelski leaving was like, oh man, I can't believe Pavelski's leaving.
Now, sometimes the schedule is kind and sometimes it's cruel. And last night, the Leafs played in Winnipeg last night. It was a rough and tumble affair. Unfortunately, Rasmus Sandin, their young defenseman, got his knee taken out by Neil Pionk in a really cheap move, and he's going to be facing the Department of Player Safety. And in retribution for that, Jason Spezza took a run at him and kneed him in the head. So he's gonna have an in-person hearing. The rematch of this, and there were some fights with Wayne Simmons and Kyle Clifford. Unfortunately, the rematch of these two teams is March the 31st. If it was in January, I would say that's appointment television. I don't know if the memory is long enough that it'll be a sort of mean-spirited game in late March when you're getting closer to the playoffs. But I think these teams hate each other. And really, Kev, I love when teams hate each other. The hockey is so much more interesting. Yeah,
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I'm fascinated, though, why we don't want to give any credit to the Winnipeg Jets. I looked on social media about that game, and nobody wants to acknowledge that the Jets are a pretty good team.
Oh, they're a great team. I picked them to make the playoffs.
Yeah, but you don't see that measure of respect on social media. Now, obviously, some people do, but I'm just saying in general.
Yeah.
The what I read from people was, how did they lose to the Jets? Well, they lost to the Jets because Jets are a good team.
Yeah, they lost to the Jets because the Jets are a really good team. It was the second of back-to-back games. The Jets seem to be getting they killed New Jersey on Friday night. They're a loaded, talented team.
Yeah,
and I'm not making excuses for the Leafs, but the Leafs had their backup in there, and they really didn't show up for the first half of the game like they did in Minnesota. No complaints about the Leafs. They've been playing great. So if they have a bad weekend, it's forgivable. We have to talk about this, Kev. Robin Lehner comes out on social media. I think it was this morning, either late last night or this morning, saying that for his mental health, he would turn down, if he was invited, the invitation of Team Sweden for the Olympics in Beijing. And I think it was John Shannon that reported that he took sort of an informal poll, and that like 2/3 of the players that he had polled said they didn't want to go to Beijing. So and that's informal, so we don't know how many players he talked to. But if it's starting to get down that road, then we have to start thinking this isn't going to happen.
Well, I think it will. I still think it will happen, but does it? But I'm also opening to the idea because I'm also hearing that there's some unrest. But I double checked on this over the weekend, and the person that is a really good source on this said what we're hearing is the guys still are willing to go, but we might lose one or two. And he says I would assume every country is preparing for the idea that one or two players are going to say, we're just not going to go.
Yeah. And what seems to be the sticking point for these players is the policy regarding quarantine for these players. Like if they're positive in China, that they would have to stay in China for 3 weeks.
Yeah, what I've heard about that is that there's a movement afoot to the idea of that there would be a special plane to bring quarantined players back after the games.
I talked about that on the show last week. Yeah, I heard that.
Sort of like the special train that delivered Lenin back to Russia during World War I.
Yeah, but the thing about it is, I said to them, so what are you going to do? You're going to bring in flight attendants who are all masked up, like hazmat suits and pilots. How is that going to work? So
it's going to be one of the players is going to have to fly the plane. Someone's going to have to.
Yeah. We have had qualified rated pilots from players. Kovalev. I think.
Where is he? Yeah, I was thinking that way too. Yeah, where is he now?
Wasn't Kovalev rated to fly a 727? I could be wrong.
Yeah, he had some crazy IFR rating that was like.
Yeah, he had a very for sure.
They could fly in the clouds. I've talked to him about it because my father-in-law was a pilot, and going for.
They get John Travolta to fly over there and fly him back. He's a licensed pilot.
Yeah. I think also that Travolta is rated to fly a 727.
Yep.
I think those players will get up and pour their own drinks if they can get out of China quicker.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what I was told, that there had been some discussion about, getting and not just hockey players, but there could be other athletes from other sports, but getting a flight with American athletes, if assuming there might be 2 or 3 or whatever.
Well, I think I said last week, there was a Polish athlete and they flew him back on a cargo plane. So there is precedence here in terms of arranging travel. So I mean that's the thing. If say for example somebody tests positive in the semifinals or the medal round, they're not going to want to stay in China for 3. I mean that would be into March. That would be into the middle middle. Yeah.
I think just what you're saying is reason why I think there would be, discussion about it. And, we know from, it's pretty clearly defined here with our NHL protocol that, it's 10 days. And, and if you're symptomatic, it wasn't, I thought it was a little telling that with Tyler Bertuzzi, the Red Wings were a bit cagey about how long anyone's going to be out, just announced flat out that Bertuzzi would be out 10 days with COVID tests, they just which I thought was a little telling. But that he'll be gone. Where before, like, with Mark Stahl, they said, well, we don't know anything yet,
Right.
Because he was just diagnosed today, so they couldn't give us any time limit on that. But with Bertuzzi, it's 10 days. So
yeah. I do want to bring up something before we get out of here that Tony Soprano brought up in the chat room, which is really funny. He just brought up right now. That the Kings need to stop wearing those Cyclone helmets.
Cylon helmets.
Cylon helmets. Sorry, Cylon.
Yeah.
Well, they're emulating Vegas, and
those Battlestar Galactica fans. Battlestar Galactica, the Cylons were the bad guys. And
thank you, Lieutenant Starbuck.
There you go. And the Knights have their gold helmets, right? And they have their silver helmets. I can't stand them personally.
They're really distracting. That's
what I would say too. It's kind of hard to watch a game because you can't get. I don't really care one way or the other about their helmets, but it is a bit distracting. Trying to watch a game with those.
They really are. I mean, we run out of we run into creativity run amok in some places in the NHL right now, because to me, it's like, and I get it. I am all for trying anything and doing funky things, and I like the white pants or whatever. I'm all for anything like that, but some of the jerseys now are virtually impossible to read players' numbers on if you're in the stands. I don't know how the announcers do it sometimes, because some of them are just I can't.
Well,
the Flyers played somebody the other day where the Flyers wore their black jerseys, which are virtually unreadable if you're in the building.
The letters are 3D almost.
Yeah, and the numbers and an orange, a sort of a blackish orange number on a black jersey. It's just you have to know what the players look like to know who that is. It's really difficult, that kind of stuff. I just think we do have to have at some point, a little bit of an Ayn Rand form versus function discussion about this kind of stuff. I mean, it's just this is really not the way this should be going. We're really heading in a weird direction. I personally,
I think it's incumbent upon the NHL and their marketing arm is let's try something and see if it sticks. And sometimes, I think the reverse retro jersey last year was an abomination. There were some good ones. I liked the Dallas Stars one, the sort of glow in the dark one. That was fine. Okay, but Toronto's was hideous. The Montreal's was pretty bad.
There is no retro with an original six team. That's not something I don't understand. Really, when you look at the original six teams, there's no retro jersey.
Yeah, but it's one thing if they do throwback jerseys. I love throwback jerseys because it's
me too.
But it's another thing when you do reverse retro and you put an emblem of the 70s on a jersey that never existed in.
And one of the reasons I don't talk about the Winnipeg Jets, Kevin, is because of this. The Winnipeg Jets taking their Winnipeg Jets logo, which was crazy retro-y when it came out in the 80s, but putting that into that color scheme that they have it on their jerseys now is ridiculous to me. If you're going to go for it, go for it. Use your Winnipeg Jet jerseys. Use the old, the Timu Solani, Randy Carlyle, Winnipeg Jet jerseys. Those are what I want to see, but not this. No, I don't know. I have an issue with that. I agree. We all like the Quebec Nordiques jerseys, right? But that's just because we like the Quebec Nordiques. We want the Quebec Nordiques to be back in the NHL, not that we love them so much on Colorado.
Well, they will be next year when Arizona moves there.
And that's another thing, Kev. I wanted to do about that because you mentioned that in your Thursday thoughts. The whole talk about Colorado, about Arizona moving, and how Houston sources told you no way or not happening type of thing.
Yeah, no, I've got a real good source in Arizona, and I talked to him about it, and I said in the thing, he said it's just more BS, and as he said, the day before, he said he was. They don't know how it got in there, and my thought is Forbes is really works hard on these kinds of things.
Yeah,
and yet he didn't seem to know that they had a meeting, the day before. They're still raising funding for their idea on this new arena, and they're well into this, so it's not like it's a secret.
Yeah.
And you look at Bettman's history; he doesn't really like moving. So, I take them at their word. I think that there's no imminent moving of the franchise, and I certainly know the league doesn't want to move it. So
even the best of sources that we would trust the most couldn't tell you there was, right? Honestly, in that situation, are you in a spot there? When you work for the team, they obviously have to keep selling tickets. They have to keep
Yeah, but this has been reported. You know what I mean? Like that. They're in on it. They're working at it, trying to get this done. Like it's not like they're going through the motions of that, and then they're working on a deal. So
yeah, I think that though every team in that situation has to have a contingency plan. Like they have to be contingency plans. They're working on it. Working on it means it's not done, right? So if it's not done, they can't.
I just don't. I think we too easily say things like, well, we'll move it to Houston, where it's not as easily accomplished unless you have Bettman on board. And as far as I know, Bettman is not on board on moving this franchise.
Right. Do you remember what it was like when Atlanta got
very much. I know. I remember that specifically because I had talked to Gary Bettman. Gary Bettman is on record that he does not like moving franchises.
Right.
And I asked him directly about this in a one-on-one conversation. And he basically said and reached the point where he really felt like he had no options because the ownership was fighting amongst each other, and they were suing each other, and they didn't have anybody willing to step in and buy the whole thing out.
Right.
And there was just too many factors, so he decided to do it. But I do remember when that happened.
But I remember talking to you back then too, and because I had one source that wasn't as good as yours, but somebody that we know mutually. I think that knew that was probably I don't know. But anyway, it was there was also a big thing on Atlanta not to talk about the possibility of it at all, like that they could not discuss it with anybody, that they could even be thinking about moving, and that anybody, if anybody even came in and leaked that they would possibly be buying Atlanta, that would be like the NHL would be like, no, basically like they're pulling like the Lou Lamoriello secrecy stuff.
Yeah, but they didn't. They just didn't talk about it. I don't think they lied about it. They just didn't talk.
No, I think I remember them specifically being told they could not talk about it, and that because when we were coming off the Bill Basili era, right, with all that stuff that went down, and that was a problem, and that was still an issue. And then and if you remember when Winnipeg buys the team, it happens pretty quickly, and it happens in a way like that they had been talking about it for a while, type thing, before we knew about it.
Yeah, they were well aware that I do remember this, that there had been a lot of discussions with Winnipeg wanting a team, and because they knew that they wanted an expansion team, they were well aware of the finances, and so it was a little bit easier to get that in place.
Yeah.
That was one, but it was surprising in that everybody knew Bettman didn't want to move anything.
Right. And I think that Bettman is done. No one can blame Bettman at all if it doesn't work out in Arizona. Like there's just no way that can. I mean, he is.
Well, I think it could go the other way. People can say he let it go on too long.
Yeah, I think that's already happening. But yeah, I think that already happens among a lot of fans, especially. That's all the time we have for today, folks. We'll be back again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. Hope you're enjoying your holidays. And remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.